The most powerful character and swordsman in the history of Demon Slayer, Yoriichi Tsugikuni has been considered an enigma by those who have known him, friend and foe alike. He is single-handedly responsible for changing the demon-slaying game forever as the progenitor of sun-breathing and the first person ever to corner the Demon King Muzan Kibutsuji. While it is common in battle shonens for the main character to eventually surpass the top dog of the past, Demon Slayer takes a slightly different approach, as Yoriichi is never really surpassed or even rivaled. This is part of what makes his character so interesting, as he seems to have it all going on for him. Despite being so gifted, however, Yoriichi's life seems to be an accursed one, starting from his birth to his upbringing, his life as a family man, and down to his very last days. In today's video, we'll dive into great detail about Yoriichi's life. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Who is Yoriichi Tsugikuni? Yoriichi is a posthumously appearing character in the story of Demon Slayer, often seen in Tanjiro and Kokushibo's flashbacks. The progenitor of the sun-breathing technique, or any breathing style for that matter, Yoriichi's genius allowed the Demon Slayer core to become strong enough to fight some of the strongest demons in the game. All in all, he is canonically and quite evidently the strongest Demon Slayer in history. Born with a permanent Demon Slayer mark on his forehead, Yoriichi could tap into the transparent world and see through living things from a very young age. Being extremely gifted led to his twin, Michikatsu, envying him and eventually becoming a powerful demon with the hopes of one day rivaling Yoriichi. However, this was a pipe dream, and Michikatsu, or Kokoshibo as he came to be known, was never able to even come close to rivaling his twin. One of the best testaments to his strength would be his battle against Muzan, where Yoriichi was almost able to defeat the Demon King in a few strikes, making him the only person Muzan has ever feared. In fact, Muzan continued to be afraid of Yoriichi several centuries after his death and went on a hunt to wipe out all known users of Yoriichi's sun-breathing technique to eradicate competition and minimize his chances of death. During his time, Yoriichi helped the other demon slayers with their training, allowing them to develop breathing styles more compatible with their fighting abilities and creating the likes of water breathing, flame breathing, wind breathing, stone breathing, and thunder breathing. The mark on his forehead, which was later revealed to be the Demon Slayer mark, was also an important factor, as it would often resonate with the other demon slayers who, amidst battle, would acquire a higher temperature of 39 degrees Celsius and a heartbeat of 200 beats per minute. This resonance would then allow the demon slayers to awaken their demon slayer marks, increasing their stats by a significant margin. This mark was also responsible for Yoriichi being able to tap into his selfless state, where he shut down his emotions to open up all of his senses and gained the ability to see through living things. Awakening the mark allowed the other demon slayers to do the same, ushering in an era where the demon slayer core was at their strongest. Unlike Yoriichi, however, the other demon slayers did not maintain a permanently marked state. In terms of appearance, Yoriichi resembles Tanjiro's father, Tanjiro, probably due to the Kamado family inheriting the sun-breathing technique from Yoriichi almost 500 years before the main events of the story. The Kamados and the Tsugikunis were never related, but since Yoriichi was able to pass down his esoteric technique to Sumiyoshi Kamado, the future generations inherited the same knowledge. It is possible that the connection to the sun-breathing technique was somehow responsible for the reddish tint in hair and eyes, even without the blood connection. Once inherited by the Kamado family, the sun-breathing style evolved into the Hinokami Kagura, or the Dance of the Fire God, which is what we see Tanjiro and his father Tanjiro using. The Kamados also inherited Yoriichi's Hanafuda earrings, the sight of which would frighten Muzan, which is why the Demon King was so hell-bent on having Tanjiro killed, even when Tanjiro was a lower level and weaker combatant in the Demon Slayer core. Yoriichi's reputation as the strongest also led to the creation of a 6-armed battle robot known as the Yoriichi Type 0. Found in the Swordsmith village, the puppet had 6 arms because otherwise the creators were incapable of emulating Yoriichi's swordsmanship. This is also why, as a demon, Michikatsu, or Kokushibo, manipulated his flesh so he possessed 6 eyes, since he was aware that a single pair wouldn't be enough for him to keep up with his brother's moves. The puppet was esteemed for greatly strengthening any swordsman who practiced with it. In fact, practicing with the Yoriichi Type 0 allowed Tanjiro to heighten his extrasensory perception and smell the future, which later made him capable of fighting an upper-ranked demon by himself during the Swordsmith village arc. And yet, the puppet could only display a fraction of the power that Yoriichi possessed. Despite his strength, fame, and influence, Yoriichi always remained humble, respectful, and calm. In fact, he had always been extremely introverted and reserved, so much so that he was considered to be deaf until he was 7 years old. His more nonchalant personality was also part of what made him so powerful, since demons have the ability to sense the fighting spirit of their opponents and predict their next attacks. Yoriichi's serene nature, combined with his ability to tap into the selfless state state was what gave him a big advantage over Muzan during their one and only battle. And yet, Yoriichi never considered himself to be special. He did go on to believe that he was blessed with his strength to kill Muzan after he came face to face with the Demon King, but his unrivaled skill never led to him turning egoistic or boastful. The early years. Yoriichi's origin story. Yoriichi and Michikatsu Tsugikuni were born as twins during the Sengoku era, or the Warring States period in Japan. Twins have historically been considered a bad omen across East Asian cultures, especially during the yesteryears of Japan. In fact, infantides were not unheard of in the event of twins being born. In Yoriichi's case, he was born with a mark on his forehead, unlike Michikatsu, which led to their father believing that Yoriichi was cursed. Such a mark held the reputation of claiming the life of its bearer by the time they reached 25. Naturally, the patriarch of the Tsugikuni household wanted Yoriichi dead. His mother, Akino, however, was dead set against one of her sons being killed and managed to strike a deal. By the time Yoriichi would turn 10, he would be sent away from home to become a monk at the temple. This did not mean that Yoriichi spent a smooth first decade of his life. He was made to live away from the main quarters separately from his family, restrained to a tiny 3-tatami mat room, and provided with poorer food and education. Meanwhile, his twin, Michikatsu, had the privilege of leading a normal life. This was a time when samurai culture was not only predominant, but also more and more men were joining the bandwagon due to Japan being in a state of civil war. Because of this, Michikatsu aspired to become a samurai. Meanwhile, Yoriichi was not allowed or even expected to have such dreams and ambitions. Despite living a segregated life, Yoriichi would often be visited by his twin, who somewhat sympathized with his brother. Once, he gifted Yoriichi an untuned flute, which Yoriichi went on to treasure with his life. However, they would never really speak because Yoriichi was believed to be deaf, which was probably due to the trauma he experienced during his birth. To absolve him from his perceived deafness, their mother, Akino, made the Hanafuda charm earrings for him, hoping that it would allow the gods to bless him with the ability to speak. For some reason, Yoriichi was always seen sticking to his mother's left side, which Michikatsu found strange. In fact, he thought it was pathetic for his twin to constantly physically stick to their mother, which created a strange emotion within Michikatsu with respect to Yoriichi. However, things began to change during one particular sword session. Michikatsu aspired to become the strongest samurai in the land, and because he was the privileged twin, he was offered the guidance and assistance to learn and practice the art of the sword. As he tried his swings against his father's acquaintance who guided him, Yoriichi uttered his first words as he smiled, stating that, like Michikatsu, he too wished to be a samurai. His sentiment was dismissed as everyone was aware of how Yoriichi's destiny was to be sent to the temple at the age of 10. Yet, the guide decided to humor Yoriichi and showed him a simple stance. Yoriichi adopted the stance and took a deep breath. Surprisingly, he was immediately able to land 4 blows on the man, which was something Michikatsu had never managed despite his years of training. Naturally, this came as a big shock and planted the seed which would eventually grow into Michikatsu envying Yoriichi. This was made worse by Yoriichi's claim that he didn't even want to become a samurai anymore, as he disliked the feeling of hitting someone, which paid ode to his more gentle nature. Later, Michikatsu asked Yoriichi how he was able to achieve the feat, to which Yoriichi replied that he had taken a deep breath and sensed his bodily activities, starting from the twitch of his muscles down to the feeling of his blood flowing in his veins. This sensation later went on to be recognized as an early form of a demon slayer's breathing style. Despite his talent, however, Yoriichi claimed that he would rather play board games with his brother and fly kites than fight, which led to Michikatsu believing that his twin was wasting his talent. Michikatsu also began to fear that if their father realized that Yoriichi was the more gifted one, their lives would be swapped, and he would be the one who would be sent away to the temple instead of Yoriichi. The matter escalated when their mother suddenly passed away from an unexplained illness. This took place before Yoriichi turned 10. He showed up in Michikatsu's room to share the news of his mother's passing and bid farewell to him as he would leave for the temple that very night. He expressed his gratitude, promised to remember him, and safely kept the untuned flute that Michikatsu had made for him. When Yoriichi left, Michikatsu went through their mother's diary and learned about her illness, which specifically affected the left side of her body and had rendered her too weak, revealing that Yoriichi would stick to their mother's left side to support her body, an act Michikatsu found Yoriichi pathetic for, even though he didn't technically know about her illness. This led to him realizing that not only was Yoriichi more gifted, but that he was also a genius who could see through living things. Meanwhile, Yoriichi knew of their father's intention to swap the lives of the brothers, making him the heir, which was not something he wanted for Michikatsu, especially due to his twin deeply aspiring to become a samurai, while Yoriichi himself hated being violent with. To spare Michikatsu from a life of segregation and denouncement of goals and desires, he left the house that very night. Once Michikatsu realized the sacrifice Yoriichi had made for him, his mixed feelings towards his gifted twin grew Mikitsu into an intense hatred and envy, which was made worse by the fact that, despite always surpassing him, Yoriichi continued to remain humble and show his gratitude for his less gifted twin. Naturally, this spouted the seeds in Michikatsu's heart that would eventually lead to his desperate wish to surpass his brother. Becoming a demon slayer and the progenitor of breathing techniques. Following their mother's death, Yoriichi ran away from the house and continued to run for an entire day and night with no breaks or exhaustion as he found his way into the mountains. During this time, he met a girl around his age. This girl, Yuta, had been orphaned after her entire family had died due to the plague. Yoriichi had found her in the rice fields where she was collecting tadpoles in her barrel. When he asked her why she was collecting them, she confessed that she was lonely since she had no family left, for which she wanted to take the tadpoles home as she hoped they would keep her company. However, when the sun set, she released the tadpoles and claimed that she didn't wish to take them away from their own families. Yoriichi empathized with her and offered to accompany her to keep her away from her loneliness. Eventually, the two began to live together in the girl's family home for 10 years, following which they got married. At some point, Uda got pregnant with their first child. As she neared her due date, Yoriichi left their hut to summon a midwife for her delivery, while a pregnant Uda was left alone. Yoriichi's intention was to return by sunset, but he was stalled as he found a frail old man injured in the war of the Sengoku era who had to reach his sun. He decided to help that man, which took up much of his time, causing the sun to set. As a result, he made the choice to go home and leave the next day to summon the midwife. Once he reached his home, however, he unfortunately witnessed that his wife and unborn child had been killed by a demon. Traumatized by the tragedy, Yoriichi held her corpse in his arms for 10 days without drinking or eating. Eventually, he was met with a pursuing demon slayer who encouraged him to bury her corpse. After which, Yoriichi picked up the sword once again and went on to train as a demon slayer. The ominous birthmark on Yoriichi's forehead was no ordinary mark. It was the Demon Slayer mark, and Yoriichi was the only one who had ever been born with it. It was directly responsible for his exceptional talent as a swordsman and combatant. During this time, he also developed the esteemed sun-breathing technique, making him the progenitor of breathing styles as a whole. At the same time, Michikatsu had become a samurai, although he wasn't nearly as strong as Yoriichi. He lived in a samurai encampment and had a wife and 2 children. His life turned upside down when everyone in the encampment, barring Michikatsu himself, was slaughtered by a demon. That very night, Yoriichi, who had become a demon slayer, arrived at the site of action and easily defeated the demon as he expressed his regret for arriving late. The reunion between the twins led to Michikatsu realizing the gap between him and Yoriichi was greater than ever. With his desire to bridge this gap and with nothing left in his life, he departed with his brother to join the Demon Slayer Corps. Around this time, Yoriichi was trying to pass down his sun-breathing technique to the others in the Corps, yet no one had the caliber to emulate the technique. To make their jobs easier, Yoriichi even went on to create several other breathing styles taken from his sun breathing based on which style each of the demon slayers would be more compatible with. The breathing styles increased their physical stats and overall abilities, but none of them were as powerful as Yoriichi's sun breathing. What precisely made sun breathing the most potent was the fact that the ultimate weakness of any and every demon was being exposed to sunlight, which would immediately incinerate their bodies to ash, regardless of how strong they were. Michikatsu attempted to acquire the same technique, but like everyone else, he failed as well, despite his biological ties to Yoriichi. Instead, Michikatsu developed his very own moon breathing technique, which was a style more powerful compared to what the other demon slayers were doing, but still, it was weaker than Yoriichi's sun breathing. At some point, Yoriichi went back to the abandoned hut where he used to live with Uda, where he found Sumiyoshi Kamado and his pregnant wife Suyako, who were on the verge of being killed by a demon. He saved them and their unborn child, preventing them from meeting the same fate as his wife and child, which led to the Kamados being eternally grateful to him. Sumiyoshi and Yoriichi became fast friends, but they didn't get to meet up as much as they would have liked. Yoriichi versus Muzan, a fateful encounter for the Demon King. Eventually, Yoriichi came face to face with the Demon King and the progenitor of demonkind, Muzan Kibutsuji, the man every demon slayer was desperate to take down once and for all. From the get-go, Yoriichi could sense Muzan's extensive evil and malicious intent, and went on to associate it with boiling magma from a volcano, which was ready to consume and destroy everything in its path. While he had remained humble about his exceptional gifts and skill set, meeting Muzan allowed him to understand that he was born with his very talents in order to kill Muzan. Meanwhile, Muzan made the grave mistake of underestimating Yoriichi. As Yoriichi had already attained the selfless state, which gave him access into the transparent world, Muzan could not access Yoriichi's strength and fighting spirit, which gave him a disadvantage in the upcoming battle. He claimed that he had lost interest in demon slayers who could perform breathing techniques and expected Yoriichi to be cut from the same cloth as the rest. As a demon with flesh manipulation as his primary blood demon art, Muzan released his appendages and performed long sweeps to eliminate his opponent instantly. Yoriichi was able to dodge Muzan's attack, but for the first time, he feared for his life, as he knew that intercepting even a single hit from Muzan could lead to his death. This meant that he had to take Muzan out as soon as possible. By tapping into the transparent world, he was able to assess that the Demon King possessed 5 brains and 7 hearts that constantly changed positions within his body due to Muzan's flesh manipulation. While Yoriichi's sun breathing had 12 different forms, seeing Muzan's bodily composition helped him realize that he had to combine his forms into a single attack to take out all of the Demon King's organs at once. This allowed Yoriichi to completely overpower Muzan, who was left in disbelief over the competition that stood in front of him. Yoriichi had also managed to behead Muzan, whose instantaneous regeneration had been rendered useless by Yoriichi's sun breathing, which made Muzan's powers as a demon weak due to the sun being a demon's kryptonite. As Muzan tried to keep his head attached, Yoriichi moved in closer for the kill, but instead heard Muzan's teeth chattering, following which the Demon King manipulated his flesh to burst into 1,800 small pieces. Yoriichi managed to destroy 1,500 of them, while the remaining 300 allowed Muzan to escape and eventually regenerate. Despite having survived Yoriichi's assault, however, the altercation between the two led to Muzan fearing Yoriichi for the rest of his life, as seen during the events of Demon Slayer, where witnessing Tanjiro's sun breathing would cause Muzan's cells in his demons to shake in fear. During the battle, Muzan had been accompanied by Lady Tameo, who had been hiding her distaste for the Demon King. However, Yoriichi had spotted that seeing Muzan almost getting killed had made her hopeful, but his escape led to her bursting into tears, especially since she believed that Muzan had ruined her life by turning her into a demon, and she was devastated to witness that he had conquered his weakness of being beheaded. Muzan being weakened allowed her to break her psychic connection with her master, and Yoriichi expressed his sympathy by allowing her to go free as he chose not to kill her. At the same time, it was revealed that Muzan had previously recruited Michikatsu, who accepted his offer of turning into the upper rank 1 demon, known as Kokushibo, as he desired all the power in the world to one day be able to rival Yoriichi. Michikatsu's betrayal, Yoriichi's failure in killing Muzan, and his decision to let Tameo go free became the 3 reasons which led to the turn in Yoriichi's life. As Michikatsu killed the Oyakata, or the leader of the corps, Yoriichi shouldered all the blame and responsibility and was ordered to kill himself by committing seppuku, which is the act of a samurai cutting his own belly open and killing himself for penance. However, the newly appointed Oyakata spared Yoriichi and instead banished him from the corps. Passing down the sun-breathing technique. Now alone, Yoriichi went back to the hut to talk about his woes with his friend Sumiyoshi, to whom he told the entire story. He was despondent over not finishing Muzan off, cried as he held the couple's daughter Sumair, and was reluctant in accepting their gratitude. But the Komodos continued to be extremely kind to him, as he had given them a future. For recreation, Suyako would ask Yoriichi to perform his sun-breathing forms, moving so gracefully that he appeared to be more of a spirit than a person. Meanwhile, Sumiyoshi burned the memories of his technique into his mind. Eventually, the time for their final meeting came, and Yoriichi handed his Hanafuda earrings to Sumiyoshi, who promised to pass down his breathing techniques to his descendants, which is why the Komodos can perform the sun-breathing style despite lacking biological ties to Yoriichi. Yoriichi went on to live his life hunting demons by himself. He even stayed in contact with the Hishiras from the corps, whom he had befriended, as he had permission from the Oyakata to do so. His absence, however, led to the corps falling into disarray, since no one could teach the breathing styles like Yoriichi did. However, he believed that the future generations would be far stronger than the demon slayers of his time, and was convinced that Muzan would be someday taken down. He had also managed to evade the curse of his demon slayer mark, which should ideally shorten his lifespan, as he managed to live until his 80s. Yoriichi's final moments, the one-sided battle between brothers. One day, as a very old man, Yoriichi came face to face with his brother Michikatsu, who had been operating as the upper rank 1 Kokushibo for the past few decades. Having turned into a demon, Kokushibo showed no signs of aging and had retained his physical prime. In fact, that was the sole reason behind him turning into a demon, since, as a human, Yoriichi was destined to grow old and frail, and as a demon, Kokushibo would not have to suffer such a downfall. However, the sight of his demonic appearance devastated an old Yoriichi, who cried. This action disgusted Kokushibo, especially because Yoriichi had managed to live so long despite his mark. Meanwhile, Yoriichi just felt sorry for his twin and decided that he had to bring down Muzan's strongest subordinate and kill his own brother. Naturally, he prepared to strike. Unfortunately for Kokushibo, Yoriichi was as capable and powerful as always and was still far stronger than him, even as an old man. Yoriichi even announced his attack as he struck and almost sliced through his neck before the upper rank 1 could even draw his blade. However, Yoriichi passed away amidst the battle before landing his second attack. The cause of his death was never defeat, but old age, and he passed away while still standing, allowing Kokushibo to realize that he had lost his chance to ever defeat his twin. Angered, he began to strike at Yoriichi's corpse, only to find out that he had kept his promise to always remember him from the night their mother passed away, as Kokushibo found the untuned flute he had given Yoriichi as a child, a memento the strongest demon slayer in history had carried with him until his very last breath. Yoriichi as a posthumous character. During the events of the main story, we see Yoriichi occasionally appearing as a spirit in Tanjiro's visions, in Kokushibo's flashbacks, or alluded to by Muzan or the other demons who managed to sense Muzan's fear of the Demon Slayer and witness some of their moments together during their one and only battle. Tanjiro vividly sees his spirit right before the Swordsmith village arc during his 2-month coma after the victory against Gyutaro and Daki. During this time, he sees Yoriichi's encounters with his ancestor Sumiyoshi. However, Yoriichi's most prominent presence is seen during Kokushibo's fight against the Stone Hashira, Wind Hashira, Mist Hashira, and Genya during the Infinity Castle arc. After he's beheaded, he regrows his head and also adopts a grotesque and monstrous appearance in the process. As he catches sight of his reflection, he's taken aback as it had been his lifelong dream to be an honorable samurai. Yet there had been nothing honorable about his demonic life and now his monstrous appearance. To die in battle was of great honor to a samurai, but Kokushibo wanted to avoid death, which led to him becoming a demon, and as a demon, he regrew his head after being defeated fair and square, which made him a monster. He looked nothing like a samurai anymore and began to have an identity crisis in front of Yoriichi's spirit while he was in a limbo between life and death. Seeing Yoriichi's serene and honorable appearance made him question if that was how a true samurai was supposed to look. The mental anguish from this question eventually caused Kokushibo's body to break down. He cried out, questioning why Yoriichi was even born while he faded away from existence. During the final arc, Tanjiro witnessed visions of Yoriichi during his final battle against Muzan. He looks through the Progenitor's memories and, from Yoriichi, learns to better his sun breathing. He witnesses Yoriichi's perfected moves and figures out all the extra steps he was taking and the little mistakes he'd been making, which had been hampering his Hinokami Kagura. And yet, despite Tanjiro achieving the feat, Muzan never held back in claiming how he was nothing in comparison to Yoriichi, which was made evident by the fact that the Hashiras and Tanjiro had to go through hell and back to rival a heavily weakened and poisoned Muzan, while it took Yoriichi very little time to completely dominate in a battle against a full-power Muzan. The story of Demon Slayer ends with most of the characters reincarnating during the Reiwa period, which is modern-day Japan. In this era, Yoriichi and Uda are seen alive, living together as a married couple with kids, allowing the strongest man with the most tragic life to find his happy ending in another lifetime. Marvelous verdict! Tanjiro, Nezuko, and Muzan aside, Yoriichi is narratively the most important character in Demon Slayer as he creates the basis for the story's entire power system and directly affects the lives and motivations of several key players in the game. Muzan's near defeat at Yoriichi's hands, as well as the fear he carries from that, is what allows us to realize that Muzan is not the invincible and unafraid antagonist that we think he is. It's his presence and power that causes Kokushibo's rise and fall, tying the upper rank one's entire existence to him, and most importantly, it's due to Yoriichi, both directly and indirectly, that Tanjiro doesn't end up as Demon Dinner despite always going up against demons way out of his league for the majority of the story. With that, today's video comes to an end. What did you think of the most powerful Demon Slayer in history? What's your favorite Yoriichi moment? Was it something we missed? Let us know your thoughts down below in the comments, and until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.